Hello guys, and today I'm going to do a quick explanation about the Steam Machine for you, and well, I'm making this because there's one thing that that always been kind of bothering me ever since the reveal of the Steam Machine, and I want to just talk about it for you all, so I'm sure, all of you are aware of this, and so, as I'm sure you all know, the new Steam Machine and other hardware, the new controller and the new frame have all been announced yesterday, and well, they'll all be very amazing. I think that's certain that they will be awesome. So, there's one thing about the new Steam Machine that is a little bit bogus, I would say. At least, depending on how you view it. Well, we'll go all the ways. Core features that define the Steam Machine. We got, well, SteamOS, which is, well, which is an Arch-based distro, a small form factor, cool and quiet, I/O for days, connectivity, power, storage. But there's this one to talk about. Now, it's said to use a semi-custom AMD CPU and GPU, which, that makes sense considering in that Valve have partnered with AMD for the Steam Deck, so it'd be logical for Valve to have the new Steam machine use AMD hardware still, and AMD hardware does still work better for Linux than Nvidia, whereas that probably can depend on the on the distro you have. A distro like Linux Mint, sure, maybe that can handle Nvidia better, but by and large, most people I feel like would just be using AMD if they're using Linux. But the real catcher is 4K gaming at 60 FPS with FSR. And well, that seems like a very big statement for them to say because, well, we gotta go all the way down to the tech specs right here. So let's look at what tech specs do we have. Semi-custom AMD Zen 4 6-core 12-thread CPU, so it's up to 4.8 GHz 30 watts TDP. The GPU is semi-custom AMD RDNA 3 or RDNA 3 28 CUs. I think that's CUDA cores. 2.45 GHz max sustained clock with 110 watt TDP. The RAM is 16 gigs DDR5, but the real kicker, only 8 gigabytes GDDR6 VRAM. And well, as I'm sure y'all know, that 8 gigabytes VRAM is these are like really low specs for a 4K game, at least native 4K. Now, of course, that does obviously depend on the game as well. If you're playing a game like, let's say, TF2, because that's a very old game, it's, literally as old as I am. If you look here, yeah, see, October 10th, 2007, and well, that's the same year I was born, so yeah, I'm almost as old as this game, just to let y'all know. But yeah, if you're playing an old game from like prior to like let's say 2019, I'd say. Anything released before Doom Eternal, then most likely yes, native 4K is possible. Of course, those games when I have FSR, that's not a thing back then. But if you were trying something more high spec like Doom the Dark Ages, then well, there's a problem because see these specs are only good for 1080p 60 FPS. Meanwhile, the new Steam machine is advertised to be 4K 60, so yeah, to be fair, it was updated to be verified in Steam Deck, but even then, you were only getting about 30 FPS on Steam Deck, and even the new Xbox Ally X is only going to get like 60 FPS at 1080. Meanwhile, as I'm sure you guys know, the Xbox Ally X is supposed to be advertised to do 120 FPS. So yeah, and it's using the Z2 Extreme chip as well. So yeah, in terms of the performance on Doom of the Dark Ages in handhelds, not the best. but I mean, it's doable if you really wanted to play Doom the Dark Ages on your Steam Deck and you don't want GeForce Now for some reason. Personally, I don't see any use for that. That's kind of stupid, but because subscription stuff, I don't want it. But yeah, only 8 gigabytes VRAM. That ain't good for native 4K. I mean, though there's a few counter arguments I want to kind of place that some people probably don't mention, and I'm sure they're not. Yeah, they're not the most foolproof spots, as we don't know anything about the Steam machine at all yet. But I still want to just describe it to you all, just so you all have an idea on what we're dealing with. So, for one thing, 8 gigs VRAM. Personally, of course, it does come down to the game, but I don't think 8 gigabytes VRAM is too low. I mean, if you were using like an RTX 5060, then you are definitely gonna get good performance in Doom the Dark Ages at 1080p. Of course, that would be you have to turn on DLSS, but for the most part, it's doable. It's definitely possible, and you don't even need the frame gen. So, yeah. So I'd say 8 gigabytes is not that bad, at least for 1080. Of course, these specs are also kind of low because Valve kind of wants the thing to be affordable, and of course you can say that the Switch 2 can do 4K despite being only 450, although that again depends on the game, and Switch 1 and Switch 2 also do kind of upscaling or downscaling for performance. So like if you were playing, let's say, Breath of the Wild on Switch 1, and even if you had it docked, it would only display 900p, not really 1080p, which other games like Splatoon 3 do. At least, I think Splatoon 3 does 1080, I'm not too sure about that. Although the new update does allow Splatoon 3 on Switch 2 to play in 4K, I heard, so maybe it can do 1080p in Switch 1, just saying. So, yeah, in all, 8 gigabytes I wouldn't say is terrible, and again, a lot of old games don't really require that much VRAMs. I mean, TF2 is one of them, because again, that game, because it kind of came from 2007, is only going to require, well, it doesn't say, but yeah, you're most likely going to need only like a gigabyte of VRAM, and maybe if we look at another old game, like, let's look at Serious Sam Classic, just to be sure. Okay, graphics, okay, it still doesn't say, but you get the point, because again, Serious Sam Classic released way back in 2001, so more than likely, you're going to play this on 4K just fine, even with 8 gigabytes VRAM. Though, again, if you're playing a more modern game like Doom the Dark Ages, then you're definitely not going to be able to play in 4K natively, and even if you had FSR, it's not going to work. So you'd definitely be tempted to more or less downscale the game resolution to 1080 or even 720p if you're really desperate for more frames. Though, of course, if you're playing it on a 4K monitor, that would mean it would look pretty blurry, even if you set the FSR to quality. Though, in my defense, I did play Half-Life on my Steam Deck while docked. I had the game resolution set to 720, and it didn't look blurry on on a TV that was 4K. So maybe it won't look as blurry, but again, I doubt that happening. So yeah, though again these low specs, they do want to make the Steam machine affordable, and same with the new Steam frame as well. Which, let's detour a bit. Let's look at the specs for this. I want to have a look. Okay, the tech specs. Yeah, it's almost the same. What's it say? It's an ARM64 processor, but it's still 16 gigabytes LPDDR5X, and yeah, I think that's all pretty much almost the same performance as the new Steam machine. So I wouldn't say that much. So yeah, not much to say about that one, I guess. So yeah, and another thing too, there are some GPUs that are still pretty powerful despite being low VRAM. I mean, we'll look at the RTX 3070. That is only 8 gigabytes VRAM, but it can still run Doom the Dark Ages in 480p or 1440p, I meant. Of course, that is with DLSS, but, you know, it's possible. Of course, other GPUs like the 3060 probably can run in 1440p just fine, because it's 12 gigs VRAM, but I don't feel like it'd be the best for that. And of course, there are also some laptop GPUs, like a laptop version of the RTX 5070 that's only 8 gigs VRAM, but you know, it would still be the same processing power. So, I wouldn't say the VRAM's the most important thing about a GPU. I mean, sure, it is nice to have, you know, like comparing to a 8 gigabyte 5060 Ti to a 16 gigabyte 5060 Ti, you definitely go with a 5060 Ti that's 16 gigs, even if it is like $500 or something. I mean, probably not that much more expensive, but you get my idea. And of course, there's still FSR and especially frame gen, which I believe will be a thing for the new Steam machine. I don't think the Steam Deck does that. Because I've been seeing the performance benchmarks for Doom the Dark Ages on Steam Deck. They did not use the frame gen. I mean, to be fair, it did release way before the 40 series cards, which did introduce frame gen. So that's kind of one thing, but it would still be weird if the Steam Machine didn't support frame gen. It would definitely, that I feel like should be possible. And of course, frame gen has its ups and lows, at least from what people say. But you know, it really should exist as a way to help people get whatever frame rate you want. Like if you want to get if you want 120 FPS, but you're not getting it consistently, well, what you can do is just cap the frame rate of the game to 60 and then turn on the frame gen and you'll be good. So, so yeah, I feel like frame gen isn't a bad thing. I mean, sure, if you're getting good FPS, you don't really need it, but it's still something. But still, Nvidia and AMD put it there for a reason. You know, they just want to help people get what frame rate they want, and which makes sense, you know. So, and well, the Steam Machine having FSR would make sense for that route, and especially if it is claimed to do 4K 60, you know, and well, native 4K that is, because of well, again, you've already because I've already said, in very intensive games like Dark Ages, you would definitely need at least what I would say is if you're getting maybe if the thing can get constant 30 FPS, then yes, you probably can enable frame gen. You'll get 60 FPS, but that's still a bit of a far stretch if the thing's only going to be 8 gigabytes VRAM. So yeah, if you're really gonna use Steam Machine in Doom the Dark Ages, I wouldn't suggest playing in native 4K. I would really recommend you just have the game resolution 1080 or maybe 1440. I'm not too sure, but you get the point. And at that case, you may as well set FSR to quality so it won't look as blurry. So that could work too. But yeah, for the most part, I wouldn't say the Steam Machine is really that capable of 4K 60 native. I mean, but you know, in terms of 4K gaming at 60 FPS, it's definitely possible. Of course, again, it is mainly just because of playing on a low resolution, and of course stuff like I can't spell it right. It's yeah, lossless scaling, yes, which is pretty much just let you scale things to what you want, and scale a 1080p window up to 4K. That's a good idea, and of course, it has its own frame gen if you're using an older GPU like I have. I'm still on my 3060. See right there, minimum recommended requirement RTX 30 series. So yeah, lossless scaling, and more than and well, people have tried to use lossless scaling on Steam Deck, so more than likely, the new Steam Machine will do. Will be able to use lossless scaling as well, with its benefits, and especially if the thing won't have FSR frame gen support, then well, that can mean you can use lossless scaling and also use frame gen. So yeah, to conclude, well, the low specs are really just because of pricing, because they want the thing to be affordable. I believe the thing will be like around at least 500 to 600, only really as high as 700, I would say, because I feel like $700 is really the highest we can go for these specs. And of course, they want to keep it similar priced to something like the Switch 2, because again, that's $450, even though that can do 4K at such a low price. Of course, again, upscaling everything, all that. And of course, even if you aren't able to play a game in native 4K, then you can still lower the game resolution or use FrameGen if you really want to. So, of course, most people aren't going to use this for 4K anyway, even though that is what they claim. But so of course, I still would probably use the thing for 1080 if I, were to get one at some point, or maybe even 1440p. I could probably upgrade to 1440p, but that's a whole different story. So yeah, and probably my own thoughts. I believe this thing will be very good. Yeah, and the new Steam controller and the new Steam frame. Though personally, the Steam controller I'm what I'm most excited for because the Steam Deck is the most modular controller. I mean, you guys remember Nerf Modulus? That thing. That Nerf blaster came with so many attachments and so many rails for you to customize. Yeah, that's what the Steam Deck reminds me of. And well, seeing that same modularity on a controller is very good because again, the touchpads mean hot menus or touch menus like for quick saves or weapons, whatever, even to just mute the gyro when you're holding it down. And so, yeah, that's what I really like about the Steam Deck's controls, and putting it on the new Steam controller is just a very awesome idea. And of course, it is a little evolution of the original Steam controller from back in 2015, which was a smart idea, but a lot of weird ideas that didn't quite work that well, but I still thought maybe it was good, for its intended purpose. So yeah, anyway, so yeah, to conclude it all, yes, the Steam Machine technically can do 4K 60. Of course, it's not. Of course, in terms of native 4K, not really, but you have ways around it. You have ways around it to be able to play in 4K. So yeah, I'd say 4K 60. It's sort of true. I'd say it's kind of true. Valve isn't fully lying to us, and they did, of course, specifically state with FSR. More people would definitely be mad on Twitter X if they did not specify that. And a little final thing. There is IGN's video on the Steam Machine. They did say they'd run it on Cyberpunk and MGS Delta. Which if we go look at that real quick. So yeah, MGS Delta, a pretty high-end game, I would say. Yeah, the recommend spec. These recommend specs are at least what I think are good for 4K. Maybe the RAM, maybe not the RAM, sure, but they did say they got good performance in MGS Delta on the new Steam Machine. I mean, though they didn't specify what settings, what resolution they use, but if the thing can really do 4K, then that would really be impressive. So yeah, that's. Oh yeah, and also yeah, I just spotted it. The thing is using Unreal Engine 5, and though to be fair, I wouldn't say bad optimization is a problem with the engine itself because there are some games that are actually optimized for pretty well, even on UE5. Like let's get Talos Principle Reawakened. So, that is a pretty optimized game I've seen. And yeah, see, look at these specs. These are like really, really low. So yeah, so to be fair, it is obviously made with proper optimization in mind because Crow Team is not like any other AAA company, that's for sure. So yeah, they care more about optimization, and even a game like Serious Sam 4, which can probably can still run pretty good on the Steam Machine. I mean, of course, yeah, I've heard bad optimization about Serious Sam 4, but yeah, that's the point. But anyway, that's basically all I gotta say about the Steam Machine. So Thanks for watching. Hope you find this video helpful.